What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young, host of the number one ranked show. This is an emergency episode of the podcast because we got to talk about Cale Gundy resigning his post late Sunday night as receivers coach at Oklahoma. A lot said right there, right? That got it. So we're going to try to work through this. I'm going to try to provide you as much information and answers to the why of this and the what it means of this as we go through. But let's catch up on what the facts are and then move forward from there. So Cale Gundy, Oklahoma assistant since 1999, one of the longest serving members of the football program ever. 24 years Cale Gundy has been an assistant coach at the University of Oklahoma, serving 3 different head coaches. Bob Stoops' first program, his first year, Cale Gundy's on that staff. And of course, he stayed with Lincoln Riley to coach the inside receivers and was coaching the wide receivers for Brent Venables in a new offense that we'll get to. But it's also that Gundy is sooner born, sooner bred. Many of you, though, that Mike Gundy is his brother. He's the head coach at Oklahoma State. Both of those guys come up Midwest City, which is very close to Norman, just a suburb of Oklahoma City, and played quarterback, right? Mike played quarterback at Oklahoma State, and Cale played quarterback at Oklahoma. Altogether, he's got 29 years at the University of Oklahoma and is one of the winningest people in program history. As a matter of fact, shout out to OU football historian Mike Brooks, who has this stat. Over the course of Gundy's career as a wide receivers coach, he's been a part of 350 games and 277 winners. So 277 wins for which Cale Gundy has been a part of, and we know what the 90s were like, and nobody wants to go back to that. So many of those wins come as he's an assistant coach at Oklahoma. He gave a lengthy statement on his Twitter account and spoke about moving to Norman in 1990 out of high school, basically having lived there for the past 30 years. For those of you that need perspective there, I'm 35, right? And I'm born in 87. Cale has basically been in Norman since 1990. The reason for which Gundy stepped down was last week during a film session, he noticed one of his players was not taking notes like he had asked him to take notes. So he picked up the player's iPad and read what was on the screen. And this is where I'll let Gundy pick this up with his quotes. The words displayed had nothing to do with football. One particular word that I should have never under any circumstances have uttered was displayed on that screen. In the moment, I did not even realize what I was reading, and as soon as I did, I was horrified. I want to be very clear. The words I read aloud from the screen were not my words. What I said was not malicious. It wasn't even intentional. Still, I am mature enough to know the word I said was shameful and hurtful, no matter my intentions. The unfortunate reality is that someone in my position can cause harm without ever meaning to do so. In that circumstance, a man of character accepts accountability. I take responsibility for my mistake. I apologize. Brent Venables also followed up with his statement saying, "It's with sadness that I accept Coach Gundy's resignation. He's dedicated more than half of his life to Oklahoma football and has served our program and university well. We're thankful for that commitment. We also acknowledge that in stepping aside, he placed the program, and the welfare of our student athletes first. In coaching and in life, we're all accountable for our actions and the resulting outcomes." He goes on to say, "The culture we're building in our program is based on mutual respect. Our staff is here to develop successful student athletes, but also young men of character. As leaders of this program, it's essential that we hold ourselves to the highest standards as we model for our players the type of men we want them to become." All right. At the end of that statement from Venables, we find out that LaDamian Washington, an offensive analyst, has been promoted to interim wide receivers coach in a critical year for Oklahoma, a year of transition for Oklahoma. And that's one of the reasons that this is such a big deal. It's not every day that you have a near 25-year, quarter-century assistant resign his post 3 weeks before the season is supposed to begin and in the midst of preseason camp. Up until this moment, there was nothing but positive momentum associated with OU football in the wake of Lincoln Riley abruptly choosing to leave the university last November and become the head coach at USC. Not long after that, Brent Venables accepted the job as head coach at Oklahoma and hit the ground running, right? Picked it up from a great Bob Stoops, who was interim, who got that Alamo Bowl win against Oregon. It was a lot of fun. Who put the pieces back together as Caleb Williams, Mario Williams, and others went into the transfer portal. As half the staff that had coached with Riley went to USC, and Venables put together his own staff, and he's filled it out with an enormous support staff. And I had wondered aloud whether or not Oklahoma finally becomes what Clemson is, or as I'd said for years, Clemson is what Oklahoma should have been over the last 10 years, including 2 national championships and outstanding defensive play, outstanding quarterback play. You know the deal. What was really adding insult to injury during that run is that Brent Venables was at Oklahoma for 13 years before choosing to accept the defense coordinator position at Clemson in 2012, and for 10 years helped coordinate one of the best defenses in the country and put together what I think is still one of the best defenses of all time in 2018. You'll remember all 4 of the starters on defensive line, that 2018 Clemson team, were drafted and 3 went in the first round. That's something Brent Venables did, along with Todd Bates, who was defensive line coach, who's now defensive line coach at Oklahoma. But it also is a man for which Venables has known for the better part of those 25 years. You'll remember that Venables and Gundy were both on Bob Stoops' first staff. My goodness, the running backs that Gundy helped put into the league are myriad. DeMarco Murray, running backs coach right now at Oklahoma, was a guy that Cale Gundy recruited. Cale Gundy also recruited Adrian Peterson to Oklahoma. He is widely responsible for making OU successful. And I think that's why this hurts so much. Many of you know me, you know my background. You know that anytime the players get hurt, I usually am siding with the players. And I hurt for them most right now because 18 to 22 is a difficult age. You are an adult. People still want to treat you like kids. I still call them like kiddos, but you have to be held accountable for what you're doing. And that means that the folks that are responsible for stewarding you also must be held accountable for what they are doing. And Venables is trying to bring back some of the culture that Bob Stoops had. Not to say that it wasn't there with Lincoln Riley, but to really get a defensive mind going, to be sound in your values, to understand who you are, and to coach with pride at what I still call the pro team in the state of Oklahoma. We ain't but 4 million people out here, y'all. Like, that team means a lot to a lot of people, myself included. I draw a lot of pride from my association with the state of Oklahoma. Sorry, guys. I'm doing it again. And Cale Gundy, as well as Bob Stoops, been a part of my life since I was 13 years old. And the implication is that players are hurt by a man they look up to, perhaps like an uncle, like a mentor, and you never expect those people to be the ones that hurt you. You want to trust those men. You want to trust them as parents, and you want to know that when you get back your young man, who's an adult, that he's better, that you send him to a place that grows him up, that develops him, that gives him a godly spirit, that teaches him the value of kindness, the value of integrity. We use that term character a lot to define what we value most about each other in this terribly human experience. On that front, I do want to commend Venables, Gundy, and the program itself for handling this. I am a fan of that team before I was put in this blessed position to talk about college football on a national front. I'm doing my Yankees job. And doing my Yankees jobs means sometimes I need to talk about these things that feel so terribly personal, even when they're not. I wasn't sure that I was going to do this podcast because I did not feel I could appropriately give you the kind of insight that is necessary here, because we're still figuring out questions that I know want answers to in the context outside of the film session, picking up an iPad and reading what's on the iPad, and that what you read being so egregious and so hurtful that you yourself feel compelled to resign after nearly 30 years at the university that is your alma mater, where your family lives, where you have raised your family, and where you have touched the minds and hearts of so many men. You also know that I am friendly with lots of the players that come through as they are in high school. Some of them I get to meet in middle school, and I get to see them grow up, and I get to see them excel. And then years might go by before I get to see them again. One of my great joys of doing the media day tour is getting to shake hands with men I knew as 16, 17-year-olds, like Woody Washington and Marvin Mims, and seeing how much older they are and how much wiser they are, and they're sturdy. They put on weight. Like I was geeking about Ethan Downs, who is enormous now, and I know that I'm a slight and small person in stature, so I make him look that much larger, but I was so thrilled for him, and I'm so proud of him, and I can't imagine how he and his teammates must feel right now. So I want to put that focus back on them and tell you the best thing you can do for them is to continue to have their backs, to listen to them when they have things to say, and to love them. You got to love them. When I think about college football, when I think about the future of the sport, that is what I want most for the players. I want them to feel and know they are loved. So for the rest of camp, we're going to see how the wide receiver room copes with this. I'm sure it's going to be a talking point throughout the year because Cale Gundy has an institutional knowledge of the University of Oklahoma and the football program that is invaluable in as far as trying to change a culture and getting to know the people and faces that you may have known if you're Brent Venables, but it's been 10 years since you actually were working with them on a day-to-day basis, the idiosyncrasies of the program, the way in which people in the local community want to attach themselves to the university itself, moving about Norman. These are all things that Cale Gundy was very good at, and these are the reasons why I believe he was such a great recruiter, is he understood what the bones, what the marrow was, what the blood was that pumps through this program. Those are tough shoes to fill for anybody. But I'm rooting for LaDainian Washington. I don't think that Brent Venables elevates him lightly for this position, and I hope he takes an opportunity to turn it into an audition to keep the job. That's what these are about, right? We'll see really how this affects the offense, but I can't say that it's going to do a bunch because I want to say that Gundy's familiar with a lot of the concepts and principles that Jeff Lebby was bringing with him. But this is really about Lebby and Dylan Gabriel and how they get along and how they can help the rest of the offense integrate themselves into what they're trying to do to be fast and to go fast. And we'll see how this affects Oklahoma in week 1 when they go play UTEP and going forward. We got a Big 12 preview episode coming up here very shortly, but I did want to touch on this and give you what I could of my knowledge of the situation and how this is going to affect Oklahoma. All right. Thank y'all for listening to me blubber. We will see y'all tomorrow. Deuces.